Hey, it's Drybear. It's been 2 days now and people are progressing through Path of Exile 2, but I'm hearing a lot of folks lauding or just engaging with the challenging nature of Path of Exile 2. And a lot of people are being met with, I'm having trouble with this, and the response is just get good. So today I wanted to give you a little bit more than just get good. We're going to talk about how to make your character stronger, more survivable, and what you can do to survive some of the more challenging fights at the very early stages of the game so you can get to late game and enjoy yourself. So once again, we're in the very starter zone. I'm about to finish the campaign, but we're in the starter zone just so for people that care about spoilers. Let's just talk about what you can do to make your character stronger and how you can survive. The first thing that's probably going to have the biggest impact on your ability to clear all the tough bosses, get through Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and move on to the cruel difficulty is going to be your gear. And one of the things that I see quite often from people that either don't play Path of Exile 1 or just kind of new to ARPGs is the fact that when you are playing Path of Exile 2, you're kind of getting stuck with limited drops. It sometimes feels like you get drops that aren't for your class or for your build. You don't get a lot of high rarity drops, either non-rares or non-uniques or nothing really useful. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that you're not using the tons of like abundant currency and crafting items that they're giving you early on. So again, we're here in the first town, but you're going to be getting these kinds of items like Orb of Transmutation, Orb of Augmentation, that sort of thing. You're going to be getting these constantly while you're leveling and progressing. And these are going to be how you actually make your character survive these boss fights and get through the early stages of the levels, because you're going to be creating your own items through the crafting system. So you'll notice that, for example, Orb of Transmutation upgrades a normal item, which is a white quality item, into a blue item, which is a magic quality item. You even have orbs that will transfer a white item into a yellow item and give it 4 random modifiers. And so a lot of times when you're like running through and getting loot, you're seeing like these crazy, like you're not seeing like crazy items that have tons of stats on them that make you super strong, and so you think the loot is really bad. But realistically, even just finding like a white item like this can be one of the best items you could get just in general, especially if it drops with sockets on it as well. You could very easily make this. So for example, this crossbow that I have right here, this was a basic white crossbow that dropped on the ground that had 2 sockets on it, and I've been using it for the last like 10 levels. It's very easy to create these, and even when you're leveling, it's important to constantly be updating your gear from that standpoint. So let's go through that process just to see what that would look like. And one thing that I'll mention as well is you want to be aware of the types of items that drop as well. The first thing that you'll want to check on is what level the item is. In general, like item level isn't the end all be all, but it does matter a lot while you're leveling. So if you look at this item here, if I'll hover over it on PC and hold Alt, you'll notice that it says item level 28. The item that I have equipped is item level 36, and there's even ones in here that are item level 40, right? So those kinds of changes can make a difference in the value that you get. Again, this is not like endgame crafting. The item level falls off later, but just while leveling, you can use them to compare items and what value you're going to get. The other thing you want to pay attention to is the type of item as well. Your items will drop and get better and better as time goes on. So for example, an alloy crossbow is not as good as a bombard crossbow. It's not as good as a construct crossbow. Just because the level or stage that you get the item from when it drops, generally as you're progressing, will get better and better. Now again, once you're late game, it won't really matter. You can craft whatever you want, and the passive that they come with is going to matter a lot more. Like if do I have a Dryad crossbow in here somewhere? You'll have some kind of benefit along that'll change there. But while you're leveling, pay attention to the item level, pay attention to the type of item, and if you see a big increase, like you might find a like regular club and then an upgraded club, and the club has a higher item level and a higher base damage on it, it's very easy to compare those together to see what value that might have if you were to craft it into something useful. Next, let's talk about the crafting process itself. Now, when we get to late game and you're trying to make perfectly rolled items, there's a whole strategy around that, and that's going to change drastically. That's not what I'm going to cover in this video. I don't want to make it overcomplicated. I just want to talk about how you can get through the campaign and get through these difficult checkpoints that you might need to defeat difficult bosses. So it doesn't really matter how you get to a strong item when you're making a leveling item. It just matters that you get something that's serviceable for what you're looking for. So an easy way way is just to take an orb of alchemy, drop it on a white item, turn it into a yellow item, hope it rolls good enough stats on it, and then just be able to use it for that. You can also just run, like, make an item, a normal item, into a magic item, and then start adding modifiers to the magic item, and then transfer the magic item into a rare item, which is a yellow. So you can take a white item, turn it into a blue item. So like, let's do that real quick. So I have some orb of transmutation laying around. I can take a normal item and turn it into a blue item. I got fire damage on it, which is added to the normal physical damage. This just made the weapon better. I just, out of nowhere, summoned 16 to 24 fire damage per hit on the weapon that didn't exist before. Then I can take the augmentation, which adds to a blue item a random modifier. So I can grab this and I can add another one. I just got 12 crit damage. Right? And then it maxes out because you only have 2 on this item here. Then you want to take this, you can add like a magic item to a rare item. We just got 1 to 9 lightning damage on top of the fire damage, on top of the physical damage that we have. And you can even start adding in like new modifiers for the rare item as well. And you can do this a couple times with the currency items you have, but you'll notice that it's very easy to suddenly create a whole bunch of value on an item that previously had none. And that's why I think that if you're running around waiting for a very good item to drop and you're not upgrading your gear regularly with the crafting items that you're getting, you're going to be significantly weaker than you should be, and that's going to add a lot to the frustration of you trying to clear the difficult bosses. Now, the next part that I don't see a lot of people taking advantage of when they're struggling a lot, especially if you're stuck on the Act 1 boss or the Act 2 boss or some of the more challenging world bosses that are trying to progress through the game, is not taking advantage of the sockets that go on your gear as well. So you can find items with sockets, and I would recommend doing that, right? Like if you find an item on a white item with a socket in it on the ground, by the way, you can even go to like the shops and like buy items that might have sockets in them already. So when you talk to people, they may actually have a socket in there already. And as you're looking through this, you can even buy very cheap items that are rolled that have good value on them as well. They give you a nice increase in power. And so that's the easiest way to do it when you're first leveling. However, you can get currency items just like everything else in this game. You can get Artificer's Orbs, which allow you to add a rune socket to a item. The best thing to do it on is your weapon, because you can get these runes that drop all over the place. These drop constantly. You'll find runes all over the place. And you can get these, and you can see that I added 40% increased physical damage to this with 2 sockets. Now, you can't remove the runes right now, but it doesn't really matter. You get so many of these while leveling. A 40% damage increase on a weapon is actually crazy. You can add flat elemental damage if you're playing a caster. You just want extra elemental damage. You can cause all kinds of things to go along with it, but I would say just flat damage, like either percent physical damage or elemental damage, is the easiest way to get it. You won't really get some bigger ones like increased elemental overall until you start getting soul cores, but the runes come free and plenty. Use them up as much as you can. Just make sure you're using them to make your weapon better. And you'll notice that when you have these, you can add resistance, you can add armor, evasion, energy shield to armor as well. Very huge, massive increases in power and value just by making sure you're using these systems while leveling. Next, let's talk about defense, because there's some easy ways to get some very big jumps in defense early on that you need to make sure you're taking advantage of. The 3 things that you want to think about for defense is going to be either armor, evasion, or energy shield. Your build will change based on this, depending on what your end game build is, or even your mid game build. But if we're talking about your first clear through the campaign, you kind of just want to take advantage of whatever is available. I see a lot of people saying, is armor better? Is evasion better? Should I have energy shield? Should I not? And the way I'm going to make this super simple for people that are struggling in general is just go to your skill tree, and depending on where you start based on your class, I would say just take advantage of what you're given early on. So let's walk through the 6 classes and what they have. Mercenary can do either, right? Because they have some nodes here that give armor and evasion. You want to grab all of these. I would grab as much defense as you can early on in the game, and you get your first maybe 10, 15 levels. Just grab a bunch of defense. You're going to need it. It helps a lot. So grabbing this. So armor or evasion works fine for mercenary. For ranger, you get a lot of evasion, which I think is great. So I would just run with evasion here. You might want to get a little bit of armor along with the evasion, and it will help a lot with that survival, but just kind of play off of that. And if you can find nodes that increase percent evasion evasion. That's going to be a big boon as well. For Monk, you can see right away that you're getting energy shield and evasion. Just like the Ranger, they're very good with evasion. This is a very easy way to start, and you can amplify this as well. So you can grab some energy shield and evasion and go along that path and get some extra value there. For Sorceress, energy shield is one of the easiest ways to get with it. And what's great about the Sorceress, especially early on, is you can kite mobs, you can stay away from bosses, which doesn't trigger their conditional melee attacks, and you can wait for your energy shield to regenerate. So with Sorceress, you can get a lot of range and distance and let your energy shield do the work. And then from that, you probably want to just put some extra armor underneath it if you can, but relying on energy shield, I think, is perfectly fine for Sorc early on. For Witch, you can get a lot of armor and energy shield early on. Some free nodes for this that really increase armor and energy shield together, and you can rely on your minions if you're using them as well. And for Warrior, I would just stack life and armor. They're so good. They get so much armor and life early on, and they have CC to go along with it as well. Stack max life, stack strength, stack armor, and you should be able to eat through a lot of things, aside from skills and other abilities that might make you tankier. The next thing I will say is take advantage of some things that might be readily available to you, but you may not know about it depending on what your experience level is with the game. So one of the biggest examples is that all characters, given the right stats, can wear a shield, and the shields will grant a raise shield ability. So one of the easiest ways to add survivability to any class, if you really want to, is have your main weapon in your main set and whatever build you're running for in the main, but then have a weapon set, or unless you have a one-hander, right? If you can use like a wand or something, you can put this on here. But having a shield is awesome because it allows you to gain access to the block ability, which can save your life in a lot of cases. Combination with rolling and blocking, super useful. And you can even just have your main weapon shooting and then have a second weapon set with your shield on it, and it gives you a great way to survive dangerous attacks or hits you may not be able to avoid, and then stay alive long enough to kill the enemy. There's also a couple really easy skills you can add to your build on the topic of just swapping in a weapon. Some really easy ones are picking up Flash Grenade from the crossbow set. This one will just do very strong stun buildup. You can just add a crossbow in your second weapon slot, put the Flash Grenade. It's just a cooldown. You can just pop it. Super easy to get that working there as well. For the bow, you can grab Vine Arrow. This is an easy pickup. It roots targets and does some extra slowing on them as well, which can be really useful for kiting for any class, depending on how you're playing. You can add in Vaulting Impact from Quarterstaff, which is pretty good. On the elemental side, you can do Ice Nova, which can help freeze targets as well very early on in the game. Another big one is you can just add in a weapon required for this and just add in an Enfeeble at level 1, even level 1. This will just cause the enemies to deal less damage, which is really nice. So you can actually just have this on a second slot or second weapon, enfeeble the target, and then even if you're running warrior or whatever else, it just helps you use this to reduce the damage the enemy target is doing so you don't get one shot. And you can even just add in some really cheap support skills as well, like Overt Power, which increases stun buildup. You can increase frost buildup, freeze buildup. This just generally makes those skills, you know, a little bit more tenable and valuable without you having to level the skill gem up, because I know you're going to want to be leveling up your own skills. Which leads perfectly into the next thing, is try to focus on a couple skills that are going to be the core of your kit, and making sure that they're leveled up properly and have 1 to 2 support gems early on. Later on in the game, you'll be able to add more support gems to a single skill, but you're locked to 2 support gems in the very beginning of the game. But you'll notice that, like, if you unlocked a skill and it's level 1, you can use higher level gems to increase its level, which will increase its potency. Now, you will still increase, like, the overall cost of it, but you can see, like, say I have armor piercing rounds right now at level 4, I can increase it to level 7, or I can even increase it to level 10. And you'll notice that the damage on it goes from 26% to 38%. Hits break 5 armor to 50 armor. It's a massive increase in value and efficacy, and you're missing out on a lot of this. And remember, these are scaling values as well. So if you go and you make your really good weapon that has decent scaling on it, has leveling up your skills, it gives you leech, you add all your armor, evasion, and energy shield based on your items, you get things working in a really strong way, and you have enough defense to survive, and your base values are good, then you go and level up your skills, and that the percentage value on those goes way up. That's a massive value increase for you overall, and if you're not doing these things, it's going to make a huge impact on your ability to defeat difficult bosses. And I'll finish out the video because I don't want to make it too long. Just talking about general combat, as much as I loathe to say it, it is very much a like action game, like directional combat action game, more of a Souls-like, if you will. And so there's a lot of strategies that you can implement, whether you're melee with like a monk or a warrior starter, or with a caster or a ranged character. It doesn't really matter. There's some basic tenets of like Souls-like games and action RPGs that if you're new to these kinds of games may escape you or may be useful for you. So generally you can kind of use your space here a little bit. This is something that actually makes a big difference with people. You'll notice that like if I let them trigger the attack and then I step away, I can avoid getting hit, right? So if I like step away a little bit too fast, they'll just follow me and follow me and follow me. You might be doing this as well, where they just keep chasing you. But if I let them trigger and then I step away, as the animation starts, I can avoid damage. The other thing is you really need to take advantage of your dodge roll as well. I know this sounds simple, but I see a lot of people that are dying to like the Act 1 count boss over and over without using dodge roll all the time. This isn't, you know, like other games where you have cooldown. You can just dodge roll as much as you want. And while you don't really have true iframes, you will get damage reduction in cases and will avoid damage in a lot of ways. And one thing that's great about this as well, a huge problem that people are running into in Path of Exile 2 is that like this situation where you like get into a corner and you get body blocked. Body blocking in this game is so unbelievably common. Like even with just two enemies, you can get body blocked. However, one thing that you don't realize is that you can dodge roll even though you're body blocked, right? And so if you're stuck here, you can put some skills down and just dodge roll when the targets are attacking and try to avoid that. Even though you can't go anywhere, if you time your dodges properly, you can actually avoid getting hit by the enemies and play around that as part of that until you can get out of that body block. The other thing is basically something that you can use to defeat most Souls-like bosses in melee combat, and it's basically utilizing a law of cone or wedge attack. So this general idea here, like there's a meme that you could say about most Souls games where if you were just to stay close to the boss and go behind them, like go like near their shoulder and just tuck around them, you can avoid getting hit. You can do this for most of the bosses in Path of Exile 2 as well. In fact, there's a couple bosses, at least like in Act 2 and Act 3, that I've had to do this exclusively to avoid taking damage. And so what you would do here is you would wait for them to start their attack, and then you would roll past their shoulder to get behind them to avoid getting hit. And then you wait for their attack to end, and then you can get behind them and keep doing that over and over. And I actually see a lot of cases where like sorceresses or witches or rangers are sitting at max range getting hit by projectiles or AoEs when they very easily could have just gone up to the target, let them start an animation and roll behind them, use their spells, go up to the target, go behind them, use their spells, and that sort of thing. So controlling space, dodging with the animation, and dodge rolling is a big part of Path of Exile 2, which is a bit of a departure than a lot of other ARPGs. Most ARPGs are about the build and using your abilities, and less about the more Souls-like kind of action combat, but utilizing this properly can save your life in many, many cases. Now, hopefully all that wasn't too oversimplified or too basic for people, but I know there's a lot of people that are complaining and having issues with defeating certain bosses or getting through the game, so hopefully this is makes it a little bit easier. Don't quit the game if it's challenging. It's worth the effort of pushing through, especially if you're playing a character. I know some people are complaining about warriors and monks struggling and things like that. Just make sure you're crafting from very basic items, take advantage of the tools you have available, and try to level up and get gear, and you will be able to push through those boss fights. And again, just like a Souls-like game, if you're able to learn the boss patterns, you will get better over time as well. So if there's other topics you want me to cover in another video, let me know down below. If you found value in today's video, leave a like down below, leave a comment for the algorithm to help this video get seen by more people, and don't forget to check out my other channels for other content and other stuff and other things.